So the big question is, are you ready, Terry?
Yes.
Okay, well then let's get going. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, so let's have the roll call.
Tatiana Aliar,
Here.
Kyle Niederman, Lisa Roman,
Here.
John Maston, Eric Rand.
Here. Let's take a moment for silent prayer or private reflection. Will you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I'm sorry.
That's no worries.
I motioned and Archie second.
Second.
Tatiana Aliar,
Yes.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
Eric Rand.
Yes. We move on to action items. Number 3.1, Business Services, Budget Revision.
Mr. President, board members, per ARS 15-905, if the governing board receives notification that the budget exceeds the general budget limit or the unrestricted capital budget limit by 1% of the general budget limit, it shall adopt on or before December 15th a revised budget for the current year, which shall not exceed the general budget limit or the unrestricted capital budget limit. Now that's quoted from statute, so those aren't my words. There's a lot of budget limits in there. The revised 2022-23 budget revision number 1, includes financial adjustments to the overall budget limit based upon funding changes that have occurred since the adoption of the annual budget last July. The hearing notification and summary documents were posted on the Arizona Department of Education and district websites on December 2nd for public review prior to the December 13th, 2022 board meeting. And I have a presentation for that. Oh, it's a PDF. All right. So the purpose, that's the statute that I did reference in the action item. The board received an expenditure analysis letter, as we do each year, from the Department of Education, and that tells the board whether or not the district back in the June and July budget process budgeted within the 1% allowable range. Basically, there's a 1% variance there that the state allows districts to have as a buffer in their budgeting. Our calculations came out to about 1.7% of that variance. So that makes it mandatory for us to revise here in December. And I'll explain some of the reasoning behind that here in the slides. Presentation will include reports, average daily membership, budget revision number 1 process, and then of course at the very end, the website that shows where all of this information can be found for financial transparency. The reports used are Budget 25 and the BSA 55-1. Those are just visuals of that, small graphics. Average daily membership, we're talking about prior year and current year, and then the reconciling process to the Department of Ed. So this budget sheet, the budget spreadsheet, the data tab entry sheet, the data entry tab within the budget spreadsheet looks similar to this. This is a snippet of a part of that data entry tab. The top piece is the actual part of the budget form. The bottom portion is data that is provided in a report from the Department of Ed. And you can see how that reconciliation process occurs. Based on the data that we receive from the Department of Ed, we then reconcile to the state and make our necessary adjustments in our budget forms, which is represented at the top. The green section are prior year ADM numbers in fiscal year 21 and 22, and then in the red section are estimates for fiscal year 23. So we're still estimating out through the 100th day, which we still have not yet hit. But based on ADE's calculations and then our revision, you can see the numbers are now and will be aligned to the state as of the date of that letter. In the next, on the next slide, the top graphic is part of the budget sheet. This is representative of the Group B weighted counts. And then the bottom portion of the sheet of the display here, the presentation, are ADE's reports. And also on the far left side, you see the letter that we received from the state comparative to the budget reports that we received from the state. And I drew 3 arrows there because this is part of the need for revision. There's a timing issue that happened also in the release of this information at the state level. So the letter was produced and sent out to districts, and then what is actually reported in state budget reports did not include every particular piece of data that we would like to use in the revision process. So you can see, for example, at the top K3 reading, that figure, it was given us, however, it was not included in the state BSA 55-1 report. That line showed 0. But in the letter took into account that the state would actually fund us for those students there, the 1,243.7 students. The same goes for gifted. If you look over on the top part of that graphic, we have currently budgeted at 0 in order to reconcile with the Department of Ed. So in the letter, they do not account for, or they do not account for gifted, even though we've budgeted for gifted and we know we have gifted pupils. So in this reconciliation process, we have to put 0 for now. We're going to capture all this back in May when we have to do the final revision in May. But as of now in December, based on reporting timelines, we're putting 0 for gifted in order for us to reconcile with the Department of Ed. The same goes for the last line, the free and reduced lunch number. Again, we're putting 0, even though we know we have a number to put there. And when we add all of that together, we're well into the 6-figure range of, again, recapturing budget capacity come May. So right now, as far as, again, just reconciling with ADE to December, this is what has to be per their letter. The budget revision process, you can see the next slide is the budget 25 slide for maintenance and operations. The little blue check marks are what I use off of their report that they give me, and then I populate our spreadsheets to make sure that we true up and that we're completely reconciled with the state. On the next slide, this is the actual part of the actual budget form where I took those numbers from the previous slide with the little blue check marks, and then I populate the budget form, and these numbers here that you can see with the little blue arrows match what the budget 25 form shows us. And this is now our budget capacity for fiscal year 23 as of December, budget revision number 1. So we are at 49.5 million for M&O as of December, the revision number 1 process. The second column, or the column on the far right, is our capital outlay column. We will see more information here in the coming slides that we actually tie out to that number as well. On the next slide, that's our M&O maintenance and operations budget form. You've seen this many times before in the budget proposal and budget adoption process. All this is showing here in that far right corner down at the very bottom that number does match ADE's number. So we are in alignment with them to reconcile for the revised budget number 1. The next slide shows us the budget 25 report on the capital outlay side of it. So the other report showed us M&O. This is the capital side of it. Again, the blue check marks show that we are reconciling, that we're truing up to the state. And then on that next slide, this is the actual budget form where those blue arrows do match what is provided to us on the state form. And then down at the very bottom, you can see that 8 million figure. That does show that we are in fact aligned with the state. As I mentioned before, final budget revision number 2, it is mandatory. Usually, we only have to do this one time. I think there's only been twice since I've been here where we've had to do it again in December. But final budget revision number 2 is due by May 15th, so we'll have another board meeting where this will be presented sometime in May. And then our final financial transparency slide, as always, all of this information is not only as mentioned in the action item, but here that all of this information is not only on the Department of Ed website, but it is on our website. And you can see the link to our website and then a graphic as to where to point and click to find what we just presented here today, including this PowerPoint slide so you can see the visuals that go along with it.
Any questions, comments?
So all of these revisions exist just on paper for the moment. I mean, we didn't actually have to cut money from any of our accounts. We just had to zero out certain numbers to match what ADE had, even though we know that those aren't representative of the true numbers. And also knowing that when it comes time in May, we'll be able to revise this and adjust it back to the true numbers.
Correct. So all we're doing now is we're adjusting budget capacity, so what we're able to spend. So we had to revise downward in order to align with the ADE, especially with those zeros that we had to put in there. We know that we're going to put those back in come May. And then also, this doesn't include us reconciling with our true carry forward with what we spent last year, putting those final numbers in for this year's budget. We'll grab a little bit more in budget capacity based on our carry forward, our final carry forward numbers for fiscal year 23. So while we had to temporarily reduce budget capacity, we're expecting to gain quite a bit of that back come May. And obviously the biggest factor is student enrollment. So as enrollment, as we've talked many times before, it drives our budget. So whether we have kids coming, that helps us. If they go, it doesn't help us.
So just summing up, you don't see any issues in operation based on this budget adjustment?
No, we're not adjusting. We're not doing anything to our current trends in spending or saving, for that matter. We're literally adjusting the budget come December to reconcile with ADE, and then we will do it again in May to recover most, if not all of that. Again, pending student enrollment. So what happens between now and May, that's anyone's guess, but we're hoping to be pretty relatively flat, like we have been in years past.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move to accept the budget revisions as presented.
I second.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
Artiana Alliar,
Yes.
Erica Rand,
Yes. Next action item, 3.2, Superintendent, the Trust Model Policy Services.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Governing board policy is the foundation of our school district and requires continual monitoring to ensure we're meeting all state and federal law requirements. The district is requesting approval to change policy services providers and partner with the trust in the important work of development and maintenance of our governance policies and administrative regulations. The district will utilize the spring semester to crosswalk our current policies with the new trust model policies, with an expected policy manual adoption in June of 2023. The new annual cost for policy services will be $240. A copy of the agreement attached has also been reviewed and approved by legal counsel as to form. And this is something that we had started talking about about a year ago. The trust decided that they were going to put together a team and develop a new model policy manual for school districts to use. We had all discussed looking at that when it came forward just to see what they had to offer. And kind of the two key pieces there are the trust already provides our liability and our legal services. If we need an interpretation of an ASBA policy, which we currently have, we have to go and use our attorney from the trust. This would have the support of the trust attorneys. They would be available to support us through this process and through any interpretation of the policies. And the cost is significantly less. We currently pay about $4,900, almost $5,000 a year for our ASBA policy services, and this is $240 a year.
Any questions or comments?
Does this in any way withdraw our district's membership with ASBA?
We have a choice in that. So currently our membership runs till the end of June. You can be a member of ASBA and not use their policy services. You can also choose not to be a member of ASBA and still take advantage of their conferences and some of those things. It would just cost to attend those a little higher than it costs to attend as a member.
I was just wondering if those were two separate issues, so, okay, thank you.
And for me, looking at this, this to me is significant in the sense of the two things. First of all, the cost, but a lot of times cost isn't always the driver.
Right.
But the fact that they will back us up and have the liability as where ASBA did not before is to me a very significant difference about going in this direction.
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
I move to approve item 3.2.
Second.
Jana Elliott,
Yes.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
Eric Duran,
Yes. We have no announcements, so I will just move to, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
Jana Elliott,
Yes.
Eric Duran.
Yes, we are adjourned.